I stood by the doorway, my hands curled into the sleeves of my sweater, watching the golden light spill into the living room. They were all there, Mom, Dad, Elisa, laughing over something trivial. Probably another one of Elisa's achievements. Another trophy, another perfect score, another dazzling smile that made the world bend at her feet. I shifted my weight, hoping someone would notice me. Maybe they would call me over. Maybe they would say they were proud of me too, even if it was just for trying. But no one did. They never did. Erica, Mom finally said, turning her head slightly, her voice sharp, dismissive. Could you bring us some tea? Elisa must be exhausted after her competition. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. Of course. Always Elisa. I nodded mutely and padded back into the kitchen. The clatter of cups and spoons masked the tremble in my hands. I tried to steady myself, but the tea sloshed over the rim of the cup, burning my skin. Still, I set the tray perfectly like I always did, hoping, stupidly, that they would notice, that they would see me. When I returned, Elisa was perched between our parents, their arms around her like she was the sun, and they were planets helplessly drawn into her orbit. I set the tray down carefully, pouring tea like a servant. Thank you, sweetheart, Dad said, not to me, but to Elisa, who simply smiled and brushed a stray lock of her perfect hair behind her ear. I stood there for a second too long. Erica, you can go, Mom added, her voice tight with irritation, like even my presence was a burden. I felt it then, that hollow snap inside my chest. Something that had been trying so hard for so long finally broke. But I didn't let them see. I turned away, walking as steadily as I could up the stairs, my vision blurring. In the safety of my room, I crumpled to the floor, pressing my fists into my mouth to stifle the sobs. The carpet soaked up my tears, the only witness to the moment my heart gave up asking for love it would never receive. Downstairs, their laughter floated up, bright and golden, untouched by the girl who had stopped existing to them long ago. I heard the rumble of his car before I saw him. That familiar, low hum that always made my heart race a little faster. I wiped my face quickly, hoping the redness in my eyes would have faded. Maybe today would be different. Maybe Alex would see me and the ache would lessen. I rushed downstairs, just as Alex walked through the door, his arms open wide, his smile meant for me. But he never even reached me. Alex, dear, Mom cried, sweeping forward first, her hands reaching for his like he was some long-lost son. Dad clapped him on the back warmly. Even Elisa giggled, tucking her hair behind her ear the way she always did when she wanted attention. How's my favorite boy? Dad said, grinning. We were just talking about you the other day, saying how lucky Erica is to have found someone like you. Alex chuckled, the sound low and easy, and I stood there, a step back, like a guest at my own party. I'm the lucky one, sir, he said, flashing me a look and a smile that should have comforted me. It didn't. Instead, I noticed how easily he slid into their world, how my parents lit up around him, how even my mother's constant sharpness melted into something warm and sweet.
They didn't look at me like that.
They never had. Come, sit, Mom said, dragging Alex to the center of the room, placing him right between her and Dad like a prize. I lingered awkwardly at the edge of the couch until Alex caught my hand and pulled me down beside him, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. For a moment, I leaned into him. For a moment, I thought, maybe he's enough. Maybe if they love him, they'll start to love the parts of me that he loves too. But then I saw it. The way Dad smiled more at Alex than he ever did at me. The way Mom asked him about his plans, his career, offering advice she never thought to give her own daughter. The way Elisa chimed in, laughing, teasing, shining like always. And, the worst part, Alex fit perfectly, seamlessly, as if he was born to belong here in a way I never was. I tried to laugh when they laughed, to join the conversation, but my voice felt small, swallowed by theirs. Invisible again. Later, when Alex walked me to the door, he squeezed my hand and said, "They really love me, huh?" I smiled weakly and nodded. What else could I say? They loved him. They loved Elisa. They loved the pieces of my life they could polish and claim. But me? I was just the girl who served the tea and prayed someone would see her. It was late. The kind of late where the house creaked and sighed with the weight of sleeping people. I sat at the top of the stairs, knees hugged to my chest, listening. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop. I had only come down to get some water, but when I heard my parents' voices floating from the living room, I froze. "Perfect for our family," Mom was saying, her voice low and satisfied. "The Montgomerys have old money, generations of it. And Alex, he's their only son. Smart boy too," Dad added. I could almost see the approving nod in his voice. Top of his class, clean record, good family name. He could elevate us even further. There was a clink of glass. Wine, probably. "And Elisa likes him too," Mom mused. Imagine if he had met her first. I squeezed my eyes shut, the words slicing through me like cold knives. Not once had they mentioned how happy Alex made me. Not once had they said anything about how I smiled brighter with him, or how he held my hand when I couldn't even hold myself up anymore. It wasn't about love. It was never about love. It was about status. About how Alex's name would look alongside ours on invitations. About how his family's money would shield our reputation. I pressed my forehead to my knees, breathing slowly, trying not to fall apart right there on the cold wooden stairs. "Let's not push too hard," Dad said after a moment. "We don't want to scare him off." "Of course," Mom replied smoothly, "but it would be a perfect match. Better than we could have hoped for. Considering, I knew what she meant. Considering that Erica had never been good enough on her own." I bit my lip until it bled, tasting the bitter metallic sting. I wondered then, if I stripped away Alex's last name, his pedigree, his perfect background, would they still smile when he walked in the door? Would they still look at me like I was finally worth something? Or would they see me for what I really was to them, a daughter only valuable through the people she clung to? I rose quietly, my legs trembling under me, and slipped back upstairs without making a sound. In my room, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how even my happiness had to come with a price tag in this house. For a while, when it was just the two of us, everything else faded. Alex would pull me close, tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, and say, "You're it for me, Erica. Always you." And for a few precious hours, I believed him. In his arms, the weight of being second best, second choice, disappeared. There was only us, raw, imperfect, real. We would walk in the old park near my neighborhood, the one with the sagging benches and the stubborn wildflowers pushing through the cracks in the pavement. Alex never seemed to notice how run down it was. He only looked at me. "You deserve the whole world," he'd whisper, pressing his forehead to mine. And even though I knew better, even though life had taught me otherwise, I let myself believe him. Tonight was supposed to be one of those nights. He was taking me to the lakeside, a small, hidden spot he had found just for us. He said he had a surprise planned. I waited by the window, heart hammering in my chest, dressed in my soft blue dress, the one he once said made me look like the sky. Then I heard his car pull into the driveway. I grabbed my bag and practically flew down the stairs, excitement buzzing under my skin. Alex stepped inside, smiling when he saw me. "God, you look beautiful," he said under his breath. But before I could reach him, before he could even take my hand, Elisa's voice rang out from the living room. "Hey, Alex," she chirped, sauntering toward us, her hair shining like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "Where are you two headed?" Just somewhere," I said quickly, trying to keep it between us, to keep the night ours. Elisa pouted. "Can I come? I'm bored." I felt my stomach twist. This was supposed to be ours. Just us. For once, it was supposed to be me. Before Alex could answer, I said, maybe too sharply, "No, it's just for the two of us." Elisa blinked, surprised. Then, in seconds, her face crumpled into a well-practiced hurt expression. And of course, like clockwork, my parents appeared. "Erica," Mom snapped, "how selfish can you be? Your sister just wants to spend time with you both. Don't be so rude." "Yeah," Dad chimed in, shaking his head like I had just committed some horrible sin. "It won't kill you to include her." My throat tightened painfully. I turned to Alex, begging him silently to say something, to back me up. But he looked caught, awkward, unsure, his hand rubbing the back of his neck. "It's fine," he said eventually, flashing a tense smile. "Elisa can come if she wants." And just like that, the night crumbled into ash. I nodded stiffly, the lump in my throat too thick to speak around. I watched Elisa beam, watched my parents' satisfied smiles, watched everything I wanted quietly disappear. Alex offered his hand to me as we walked out the door, but it didn't feel the same. Not anymore. The drive to the lake was supposed to be full of laughter, our laughter. Instead, it was Elisa's voice that filled the car, bright and bubbling like champagne spilling everywhere. "Alex, do you remember that festival last year?" she asked, leaning forward from the back seat, her hair falling perfectly over her shoulder. "I bet Erica didn't tell you, but I totally won the pie-eating contest." Alex laughed, a real, easy laugh I hadn't heard from him in weeks. "Seriously?" he said, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. "I can't even imagine you with your face stuffed with pie." It was hilarious. Elisa giggled, lightly tapping his shoulder from behind. "I was such a mess, but I still looked cute, right?" He chuckled again, flashing her that warm grin, the one I thought was mine. I forced a smile, staring out the window. My hands fidgeted uselessly in my lap. Alex reached over once, squeezing my knee lightly, as if to remind me I was there. But then Elisa squealed about spotting a carnival ride set up by the roadside, and his attention snapped back to her instantly. At the lake, it only got worse. Elisa tugged Alex toward the water's edge, pointing at the little boats docked there. "Let's rent one. Please, Alex." He hesitated, glancing at me. I shrugged. What else could I do? Say no and get scolded again? Be labeled as selfish again? Within minutes, Elisa was dragging him into a rickety little paddle boat, giggling as she nearly tipped them over getting in. I followed silently, sitting awkwardly beside Alex while Elisa took the front, chattering away about childhood stories, fake fumbling the oars so Alex would help her. And he did, laughing, smiling, helping. Every now and then, he'd look back at me and say, "You okay, babe?" Either not. Because what was I supposed to say? That it hurt. That even when he was right beside me, I felt 1,000 miles away? As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in brilliant pinks and oranges, Elisa stood up dangerously, throwing her arms out wide. "This is so magical," she cried. "Careful." Alex laughed, grabbing her hand to steady her. Their fingers brushed, and something in my chest snapped so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. When we finally docked, Elisa clung to Alex's arm, shivering dramatically from the cold breeze. Without thinking, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. Just like that. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she was the one he was supposed to protect. "You're such a gentleman." Elisa beamed at him, snuggling into the jacket like it was hers. Alex smiled, ruffling her hair playfully. "Anything for a lady." He didn't even look at me when he said it. I trailed behind them on the walk back to the car, the night air biting at my bare arms, my heart shivering harder than my body ever could. And for the first time, a tiny, terrible thought rooted itself deep inside me. Maybe I was never the one who fit his world. Maybe I was just someone he had settled for, until something shinier, sweeter, easier came along. Someone like Elisa. The drive home was silent. I sat pressed against the window, staring out into the darkness, watching the world blur by. The car hummed steadily, but inside, it felt like the whole world was shattering. Every glance, every laugh, every touch between Alex and Elisa felt like an arrow piercing through me. When we finally reached my house, Elisa was the first one out of the car, practically bouncing with excitement. "Thank you so much for today, Alex," she gushed, her voice sweet and syrupy. "It was perfect." Alex smiled at her, his hand on the back of her head as he waved goodbye. "Anytime, Elisa. You're great company." She tossed me a quick, dismissive smile before darting up the front steps, leaving me standing there, like an afterthought. I looked at Alex. He was still grinning, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Not anymore. Can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He paused for a second, then nodded, stepping out of the car and walking toward the porch with me. There was a hesitation in his movements, a slight unease that made my heart pound even harder. Once we were out of earshot, I turned to him, biting my lip. "I need to ask you something, Alex." He frowned, his hands sliding into his pockets. "What's up, babe?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Why are you so different with her?" I asked, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "With Elisa, I mean. It's like you only care about her today." Alex's expression shifted, his brow furrowing. "What?" "Come on, Erica. No, really. I cut him off, my voice shaking now. You barely looked at me. It was like I wasn't even there. You were so caught up in her laugh, her stories, her everything. And then you gave her your jacket, Alex. Your jacket. His face softened, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. You're overreacting. Elisa's just fun, you know? She's lighthearted. It's not like that with you. You're different. My chest tightened. Different? So that's what this is about, then. I'm not fun enough. I'm not easy enough for you. Erica, no, he said quickly, reaching for my arm, but I pulled away, taking a step back. I didn't mean it like that. It's just, with Elisa, everything feels so simple, you know? I swallowed hard, fighting the sting of tears. She's innocent, right? I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. She's everything you want me to be. Everything they want me to be. So I guess I'm just not enough for you, am I? Alex's jaw clenched, and for a moment, I thought he might say something to reassure me, something to pull me back. But he didn't. Instead, he took a slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck. Erica, it's not like that, he said, voice quieter now, but the weight of his words felt heavy. You're smart, and you're beautiful, and you're not like Elisa. And that's what makes things complicated. Complicated. That was the word he chose. The breath I'd been holding slipped from my lungs in a shaky sigh. I didn't even know how to respond to that. All I could hear was the thudding of my heart in my ears, the awful, crushing sound of what I had already known deep down. He wasn't in love with me, not the way I needed him to be, not the way he was in love with her. Complicated. I repeated, the word tasting like broken glass. So, what does that mean for us, Alex? What are we doing here? He hesitated again. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out, okay? Just give me some space. The words were a punch to the gut. Give me some space. That was it. That was all he could give me. I stood there, staring at him, feeling the walls of my heart crumble into dust. Right, I whispered, the cold air biting at my skin, but the chill in my chest was far worse. I'll give you space, Alex. Don't worry. You've already made your choice. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw something close to regret flicker in his gaze. But it was too late. Too late for apologies. Too late for anything. I turned and walked away, my steps faltering slightly, and didn't look back. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet, and I found myself waiting for Alex to reach out, to say something that would bridge the gap between what I feared and what I hoped for. And then, one afternoon, just when I thought I'd given up on waiting, he showed up at my door. I was in the kitchen, half distracted, staring out the window at the soft drizzle that had started falling. When I heard the knock, I didn't even have to look through the peephole to know who it was. I opened the door slowly, my heart skipping in anticipation and dread all at once. Alex stood there, looking uncertain. His hands were shoved in the pockets of his jacket, his expression more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. Hey, he said quietly, taking a step toward me. Can we talk? I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He entered slowly, eyes not quite meeting mine, as if he was afraid of what he might see there. We stood in the living room, the silence thick between us. I crossed my arms over my chest, waiting for him to say something, anything. I messed up, Alex finally said, his voice low. I was an idiot. I didn't see how much I hurt you. I let myself get caught up in Elisa's, in her energy, her excitement, and I completely neglected what you needed. I swallowed hard, the words he said stirring something deep inside me. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to yell at him for making me feel like nothing. But the sincerity in his eyes made it hard to hold onto that anger. I was selfish, he continued, stepping a little closer. I never meant to make you feel like you were second choice. I never wanted you to feel that way. I looked away for a moment, fighting back tears. But when I turned back to him, I saw the guilt in his eyes, and for some reason, it softened the hurt. Why didn't you just tell me what was going on? Why did you let it get so bad? I asked, my voice trembling. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't know how to explain it. It was like I kept comparing you two and it wasn't fair to you. Elisa's easy, you know? And I took that for granted. But I see you, Erica. I do. And I want to see you, only you. The words hung in the air between us, and I felt a knot loosen in my chest. Do you? I asked, almost afraid to believe it. "I do," he answered softly, taking another step forward. "I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I'll make it right." I hesitated, my heart still a little broken, but a part of me wanted to believe him. More than anything, I wanted to believe that he could still see me, that the distance between us could be erased. And so, I made the choice to forgive him. "I don't know if things will go back to how they were," I said quietly, "but I'm willing to try if you are." His face softened, and he reached out, gently touching my cheek. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I won't take you for granted again." And just like that, the air between us changed. The tension lifted, and for the first time in days, I smiled, a real smile, the kind that felt like it came from deep inside. Over the next few weeks, things started to feel lighter, less strained. Alex made more of an effort, surprising me with small gestures, making me laugh again, and showing me the side of him I'd once fallen for. We went on walks, just the two of us, rediscovered the simple joys in each other's company. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like we were building something new, something stronger. We spent a day at the beach, just sitting together under the sun, laughing at the way the waves chased us as we dipped our toes in. The weight of my heartache slowly began to fade, replaced by something warm, hope, maybe. A hope that things could work out between us. But there were moments when I caught myself watching him, the way he looked at me, the way his hand always found mine, and I wondered, for a fleeting second, if this was enough, if I was enough. And for the first time, I didn't have the answer. But maybe, just for now, that was okay. It was a night I had dreamed of, but never imagined would happen like this. Alex had invited me out to dinner, telling me it was a surprise. We arrived at his friend's house, a large, beautifully decorated place full of laughter and music. The moment we walked in, I could feel the energy of the room shift. There were so many of his friends, their smiles wide, and their voices high with excitement. I thought maybe it was just a casual get-together. I had no idea what was coming. Alex led me to the center of the room, and all eyes turned to us. A hush fell over the crowd, and I glanced up at him, confused. He smiled at me, but it wasn't just any smile. It was something else, something different, something serious. "I have something I want to say," he began, his voice ringing out through the silence. My heart skipped a beat. My stomach fluttered. I've been lucky enough to find the person who completes me, someone who makes me better, who makes me feel like I can be the best version of myself. And I can't imagine my life without her. "So, Erica," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small box. "Will you marry me?" I gasped. My hands went to my mouth, and for a moment, I could barely breathe. He was kneeling in front of me, holding out a sparkling ring, his eyes full of love and hope. The room erupted into applause, the cheers and congratulations deafening. My knees felt weak, but I managed to nod, tears welling up in my eyes. "Yes," I whispered, voice breaking. The room exploded with joy. Alex stood up, slipping the ring onto my finger, and everyone swarmed us, congratulating us, clapping us on the back, and congratulating us as if everything was perfect. But as the noise settled and people began to mingle, I noticed something, or rather, someone. Elisa. She stood off to the side, her expression unreadable. But as she caught my eye, she flashed me a smile. Not the kind of smile that said, "Congratulations," but something darker, more calculating. It made my skin crawl. Alex's friends surrounded us, and the night continued, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Something was off about Elisa's presence. And it didn't take long for the storm to hit. The next day, everything changed. Alex was sitting on the couch, the morning light streaming in through the windows, his face tense as he stared at his phone. I walked in, excited to talk about the proposal, but the excitement in me faltered when I saw the serious look on his face. "Alex, what's wrong?" I asked, walking over to him. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Erica, we need to talk." My heart sank. "What's going on?" Alex looked away for a moment before meeting my gaze again. "Elisa, she told me something. About you." I frowned, confusion clouding my thoughts. "What? What did she say?" Alex exhaled sharply. "She said you've been acting differently lately, that you've been distant, and that you're just using me for the attention and the lifestyle." I froze. "What? That's insane. Elisa is lying. She said you've been flirting with other guys at parties, and that you've been using your relationship with me to get ahead in life," he continued, not looking at me. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. Flirting with other guys? Using him? The accusations were so ridiculous, so far from the truth, but the look in Alex's eyes made it clear. He was listening to her. He was believing her. I felt like I was suffocating, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Alex, I swear, none of that is true. I love you. I would never do that, I pleaded. He shook his head, the doubt in his eyes unmistakable. But why would she say that, Erica? Why would Elisa lie about something like that? I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me, my chest tightening with frustration and hurt. How could he believe her over me? I didn't know what else to say. My mind raced, my heart shattered. Elisa had always been a threat, I'd known that. But to see Alex so easily swayed by her lies, it was too much. Maybe you should talk to her, I said, quietly defeated. Maybe I should apologize to her. Maybe she's right. Maybe I've been acting differently. I couldn't believe the words were coming out of my mouth. But in that moment, I had no choice. I had to make it stop. A few hours later, I stood in front of Elisa, my heart pounding in my chest, the words "I'm sorry" lodged painfully in my throat. She stood there, her expression smug, arms crossed over her chest, watching me with a mixture of amusement and satisfaction. "You know, I never thought you'd get this desperate," she said, a sly smile curling her lips. "But you always surprise me, Erica." I clenched my fists at my sides, but I forced myself to speak. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to cause any problems. I was wrong." Elisa's eyes gleamed with triumph, and she tilted her head, savoring the moment. "It's okay," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "I understand. Alex is a great catch. But just remember, Erica, you're not the only one who deserves him." I nodded, the sting of her words hitting me like a slap. "I know." And in that moment I realized I had lost. Elisa had won. And Alex? He was just as blind as I had always feared. Dinner at Alex's house was supposed to be a step forward, a way for our families to bond and celebrate our future together. But the moment I stepped into his home, I knew something was wrong. His parents were kind, of course, warm smiles, handshakes, but there was a tension in the air that I couldn't quite place. Elisa was already there, sitting at the table with a glass of wine, chatting animatedly with Alex's mother about some art exhibit she'd recently attended. I stood awkwardly by the door, my nerves tightening. I was supposed to feel welcome, but instead, I felt like an outsider in a place that was supposed to be a second home. Alex's dad, Mr. Montgomery, stood up to greet me, his hand extended with a wide grin. "Erica, so glad you could join us. It's been too long since we had the pleasure of meeting you." I smiled, shaking his hand, but my stomach twisted as I noticed how effortlessly Elisa seemed to fit in with them. She was laughing softly at something Alex's mom had said, her hand resting delicately on her glass, her voice lilting and smooth. When Alex finally looked at me, his smile was warm, but there was an unreadable distance in his eyes. "You okay?" he asked softly, though the moment was lost when Elisa giggled loudly and chimed in. "Oh, I just love this painting, Mrs. Montgomery. It's so bold, so sophisticated. It really speaks to me," Elisa said, flashing a bright smile at Alex's mom. "Yes, Elisa, I completely agree," Mrs. Montgomery responded, her tone warm, but her attention fully on Elisa. "You have such a refined taste." I could feel my heart sinking as I stood there, unsure of where to sit, my hands trembling ever so slightly. Alex's mom glanced at me, then back at Elisa, almost as if she had forgotten I was standing there. "Erica, sweetheart," Mrs. Montgomery said after a pause, her voice sweet, but her attention clearly elsewhere. "Have a seat, dear. We're just waiting for dinner to be served." I sat down, trying to steady myself, but it felt like I had been shoved to the side, while Elisa effortlessly took center stage. I tried to join in the conversation, but every attempt was met with a soft, distracted smile from Alex's parents, followed by Elisa's enthusiastic comments and shared experiences with them. "Remember that time we went to Paris, Alex?" Elisa said, leaning toward him. "You were so grumpy the entire time, but I just adored it. We should all go back there sometime. Don't you think so, Erica?" I nodded weakly, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "Yeah, sure. That sounds nice," I said, forcing a smile. But the words felt hollow. Throughout dinner, it was the same story. Alex's mom kept asking Elisa about her latest trips, her favorite fashion brands, her thoughts on art, while Alex's dad laughed at all her jokes and agreed with every opinion she voiced. Meanwhile, I sat quietly, picking at my food, feeling invisible. Every time I tried to contribute to the conversation, it was like I wasn't even there, a mere afterthought. Elisa was the star of the evening, and I was just the background character in her perfect little world. When the meal finally came to a close, Alex's dad raised his glass for a toast. "To our son, and to his beautiful fiancé," he said, a smile in his voice, his eyes glancing lovingly at Elisa. "And to Elisa, who we know will be a wonderful addition to this family." My heart shattered. Elisa had managed to steal the show again, effortlessly becoming the center of attention. She had Alex's parents eating out of the palm of her hand. And here I was unsure, invisible, unwanted. I turned to Alex, hoping for some sign of recognition, some acknowledgement of how I felt. But when he looked at me, it was as if everything was fine, his smile soft but distant. "Erica," he said a little too casually, "I'm glad you're here. I really am." But it didn't feel like he meant it. It didn't feel like he even saw me. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just competing with Elisa anymore. I was competing with an image of perfection that she had crafted effortlessly. I forced a smile and nodded, trying to hide the hurt inside. "Me too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It was supposed to be a fun afternoon, a chance for Alex's mother and me to spend some time together. She'd suggested it, a little shopping spree to bond, as she put it. I was excited at the prospect. Maybe I could finally feel like I was part of this world Alex's family lived in. Of course, Elisa tagged along. At first, I told myself it wasn't a big deal.
It was a simple shopping trip.
But as we entered the high-end boutique, I couldn't shake the feeling that Elisa was always going to be the one pulling the strings, the one in the spotlight. Alex's mother, Mrs. Montgomery, was warm and welcoming at first. "I'm so glad you're here today, Erica," she said, giving me a genuine smile. "I think we'll have a great time picking out some new things for your wardrobe. You've been so busy with everything. I imagine you haven't had much time for shopping." I smiled, grateful that she seemed genuinely interested in me.
"Thank you, Mrs.
Montgomery. I could really use some new clothes. You always have such great style." But before she could respond, Elisa piped up from the side, her voice carrying effortlessly across the store. "I just love this place. Everything is so chic, don't you think, Mrs. Montgomery?" She glided over to a display of designer handbags, running her fingers over the leather as if she were born to be there. "I'm absolutely obsessed with this one. It's so timeless." Mrs. Montgomery smiled at her, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "Oh, Elisa, you have such impeccable taste. I always love hearing your opinions on things like this." I felt a pang in my chest. I wasn't jealous, at least I told myself I wasn't, but the way Elisa was able to command attention so effortlessly left me feeling small. We moved through the boutique, and it became increasingly clear that the afternoon was no longer about bonding between me and Mrs. Montgomery. Every time I tried to suggest something or express an opinion, Elisa was already there, steering the conversation back to herself. "Erica, I think this shade would be perfect for you," Mrs. Montgomery said, holding up a deep blue dress. It was beautiful, but I could tell she was distracted by the new arrival of a pair of shoes Elisa was inspecting. "What do you think, Elisa? Do you think Erica would look good in this color?" Elisa took a moment to examine the dress before turning her attention back to the shoes. "Oh, it's cute," she said with a dismissive shrug, not even bothering to look up. "But it's not really her style, don't you think? I mean, Erica's more about comfort, right?" I froze, a lump forming in my throat. "More about comfort?" Mrs. Montgomery, clearly picking up on Elisa's tone, turned to me with a smile. "Maybe something more fun for you, Erica. You've been so sweet, but I think you deserve something a little more bold, don't you?" I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, I could feel my insecurities creeping up. It wasn't just the clothes. It was everything. The way Elisa had this effortless charm, this ability to make everyone else fade into the background. Even Mrs. Montgomery seemed more enamored by her than by me. As we continued shopping, I realized that I was just a shadow in the background, a mere spectator in a life that wasn't quite mine. I had hoped to connect with Alex's family, to become part of this world, but I was beginning to see that I was always going to be the outsider. At the end of the trip, Mrs. Montgomery suggested we stop for tea. As we sat in the cozy corner of the cafe, I noticed Elisa leaning in closer to Alex's mother, their conversation growing more animated. Alex's mother was nodding along, her attention fully on Elisa, as if I wasn't even there. I tried to join in, but it was impossible. Elisa's voice was smooth and engaging, and she had a way of talking that made everyone around her feel like they were on the edge of their seats. I felt like I was invisible, lost in the conversation, barely a part of it. As I sat there, sipping my tea, the weight of the moment crashed down on me. I was never going to be the one who captured Alex's family's attention the way Elisa did. I had hoped things would change, but they hadn't. They never would. The days after the shopping trip were tense, though neither of us spoke about it directly. I couldn't shake the feeling of being overlooked, ignored, always second to Elisa. It gnawed at me, making it harder to hide my frustration. I had tried to be understanding, to let things slide, but the more I saw Alex's family fawn over her, the more I felt like I was losing them. We were sitting in the park one evening, just the two of us, but the silence between us felt so heavy that I could hardly breathe. Alex had his arm around me, but I could feel his attention drifting. He had been distracted for days, more preoccupied with texts, phone calls, and fleeting glances at Elisa's social media posts than with me. "Alex," I finally said, my voice small but firm. "We need to talk." He looked at me, brow furrowing slightly, as though he hadn't been paying attention. "Yeah? What about?" "I don't know if I can keep doing this," I said, my voice cracking, feeling like I'm invisible, like everything I do isn't enough. Alex's eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought I saw genuine confusion. "What do you mean?" "You're not invisible, Erica. I love you, and you know that." But I could hear the hesitation in his voice, the uncertainty. It wasn't like it used to be, the easy confidence that came with knowing we were a team, that we had each other's backs. It had been replaced by distance, by a growing unease that I couldn't ignore. "You've been distant lately," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I feel like I'm competing with Elisa, like no matter what I do, it's never enough. She has your family wrapped around her finger, and you don't even see it." Alex looked away, his fingers drumming on the bench nervously. "Erica, that's not what's happening. She's my sister. She's been around a lot longer than you, and sometimes she just gets more attention because she's so." He trailed off, clearly searching for the right word. But his hesitation only stung more. "She's easy to talk to, you know? She's outgoing, confident. It's just who she is." I felt my chest tighten as his words settled in. "So that's it? I'm not outgoing enough for you? I'm not good enough because I don't know how to act like her." "No, that's not what I'm saying," Alex quickly corrected, his voice softening. "Erica, you are good enough. You're amazing, but you can't compare yourself to her. You're different, and that's what I love about you." But his words felt hollow. They didn't change the fact that I had spent the last few weeks feeling like I didn't belong, like I was just another accessory in his world. "Then why does it feel like I'm invisible every time we're with your family?" I asked, the frustration finally breaking free. "Why does it feel like I'm always the one left behind? Why is it always Elisa's opinions, Elisa's ideas, Elisa's everything?" Alex looked uncomfortable, shifting on the bench. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "Erica, I don't want you to feel this way. I don't want you to think that I'm choosing her over you. But she's been part of my life for so long, and sometimes it's hard for me to balance everything. I don't know how to make you feel like a priority when she's so involved in everything." I was quiet for a long moment, absorbing his words, but they didn't make me feel better. They didn't change how I felt, how I knew I was slipping through the cracks. "I just need you to see me, Alex. To really see me," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I need you to show me that I matter as much as everyone else does to you." There was a long silence. Alex's eyes softened, his hand reaching out to touch mine, but it felt different this time. Like it was a gesture he felt obligated to make, not one born from genuine connection. "I'm sorry, Erica," he said finally, his voice tinged with regret. "I know I've been distant. I promise I'll do better. I just don't want you to feel like you have to compete for my love. You don't. You never have to." But as I looked into his eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling that his words were just that, words. Promises made in the heat of the moment, but empty in the face of everything that had been happening. And I didn't know if I could keep waiting for something to change, because it felt like no matter how much I loved him, I was always going to be second place. The world outside seemed like a blur as we sat on the rooftop of Alex's apartment building, the city skyline stretching out before us in a haze of golden light as the sun dipped lower into the horizon. It had been one of those rare days where everything else faded away, leaving only us. Alex had been quieter than usual, but tonight it was different. He wasn't distracted. He wasn't thinking about Elisa or his family or anything that usually weighed on his mind. He was here with me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like we were in sync again. I took a deep breath, savoring the cool evening air, as Alex reached for my hand. His fingers were warm against mine, the touch grounding me in this moment. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen in weeks, soft, sincere, and full of something that made my heart beat a little faster. "I've missed this," he said quietly, his voice low and tender. "Just us. No distractions, no pressures, just you and me." I smiled, leaning into him as we sat on the edge of the rooftop, our legs dangling off the side. The world below was quiet, but up here, it was just us and the sound of our breathing. I rested my head on his shoulder, my heart swelling with a mixture of relief and warmth. "I've missed this too," I murmured. "I've missed you, Alex. Not the guy you're supposed to be for everyone else, but just you." He turned to face me, his eyes softening.
I'm sorry, Erika.
"For everything. I know I've been distant, but it's never been about you. You've always been my priority, even when I've been too wrapped up in everything else." I nodded, feeling my chest tighten with emotion. "I know, but it still hurt." He pulled me closer, wrapping his arm around me, and for a moment, everything felt right. The weight of the world didn't matter. The pressure to meet expectations. It all melted away. In this space, it was just us. Two people who had weathered the storm together, finding their way back to each other. "I'm here now," he said, his voice full of determination. "And I'll be here, no matter what. I promise." I looked up at him, my eyes searching his, looking for the truth in his words. And when I found it, I felt a rush of relief. "Alex," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." He leaned down, his forehead touching mine. "I'll show you, Erika. Every day I'll show you." And then, without another word, he kissed me. It was gentle, slow, as if he were trying to pour all the love he had for me into that one moment. I kissed him back, and for the first time in so long, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. No past, no expectations, just the two of us, lost in the sweetness of the moment. When we pulled away, Alex kept his arm around me, pulling me closer as we watched the sun finally set, casting the city in hues of pink and purple. The world felt peaceful again. The noise, the drama, the tension, it was all just gone. For a while, we sat there in silence, letting the quiet moments fill the space between us. But there was no need for words. We had both said everything we needed to say. "Thank you," I whispered after a long while, my voice soft but full of meaning. "For what?" he asked, his thumb brushing over my hand. "For being here, for us." He smiled, the warmth of his gaze making my heart flutter. "Always." It all started with a conversation I never saw coming. I was sitting at the kitchen table, enjoying a quiet morning when my parents walked in, looking more serious than usual. Elisa was with them, sitting a little too quietly, a glint of something I couldn't quite place in her eyes. "Erika, we need to talk to you about something important," my father said, his voice soft but firm. I looked up, sensing the weight of the moment. "What's going on?" "Alex," my mother began, her tone uncharacteristically businesslike. "We've been talking with Elisa, and we believe it's time she learned more about the family business. We think she could really benefit from a mentor, and there's no one better than Alex." My stomach dropped. "Wait, what do you mean? You want Alex to mentor Elisa?" Elisa smiled brightly, but there was something calculating behind her gaze. "It's just that I'm not as experienced as you, Erika," she said with feigned sweetness. "But with Alex's help, I could really learn the ropes. I know it will be good for me and for the family." I looked over at Alex, who was sitting on the couch, silent, and uncomfortable. He glanced at me, and I could tell he didn't want to say no. My parents were putting him on the spot. And, of course, he was always the one to do whatever would make them happy. "Erica, sweetheart, we know you've been helping Elisa," my mother said. "But she needs something more structured, something more professional. And Alex can help her with that." I felt a knot form in my chest. Elisa, Alex's assistant? Was this really happening? I wanted to protest, to argue, but I could feel the pressure mounting, the expectation that I should support this decision, even if it hurt. "Of course," I said through clenched teeth, trying to mask the bitterness rising in my throat. "If that's what you think is best." Elisa beamed, but the smugness in her eyes made my skin crawl. "I'm so grateful, Erica. I promise I'll work hard and make you proud." I forced a smile, but my heart was already sinking. The last thing I wanted was to see Elisa in Alex's world, in his professional space where she could worm her way into his life even more. A few days later, at work, the tension was palpable from the moment Elisa walked into the office. She had been placed as Alex's assistant, which meant long hours spent together in close proximity. I hadn't confronted Alex about it. I didn't want another fight, didn't want to bring up the insecurities I felt bubbling inside me. But every time I saw Elisa smiling at him, every time she leaned in just a little too close, something twisted inside me. I knew Elisa wasn't here just to learn. She was here to charm Alex, to manipulate him.
And it worked.
It didn't take long for Elisa to begin her subtle campaign. At first, it was small things, lingering touches, soft laughter that lingered a bit too long in the air. But then, she started wearing clothes that were a little too revealing for the office, her voice a little too sweet, her eyes a little too focused on Alex. I couldn't help but watch from the sidelines. Alex had always been kind to her, supportive, eager to help her learn, as he always did for people he cared about. But Elisa knew how to push boundaries. She knew how to draw him in with her warmth and charm. One afternoon, I walked into the office unexpectedly, thinking I could surprise Alex with a coffee. But instead, I froze in the doorway. Elisa was standing far too close to Alex, her hand brushing against his arm as she leaned over his desk, laughing at something he'd said. He laughed too, but when I saw the way her fingers lingered on his arm, a tightness gripped my chest. He didn't pull away. He didn't even seem to notice. I stepped back, not wanting to interrupt, but also not wanting to face the growing tension between them. It was clear Alex was distracted, and Elisa knew exactly what she was doing. When Alex came home that night, I couldn't keep the weight off my chest any longer. I waited until we were alone in the living room, the quiet of the evening filling the space around us. "Alex," I started, my voice trembling. "How's everything with Elisa? Is she adjusting well?" He sat down beside me, his expression soft. "Yeah, she's doing fine. She's eager to learn. She's a quick study." "I noticed," I said, my voice flat. "She's very eager." Alex looked at me, his brow furrowing.
What do you mean by that?
I swallowed, trying to control the bitterness creeping into my words. "She's a little too eager, Alex. She's always touching you, laughing a little too much at your jokes, getting close when it's unnecessary." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Erica, you know I care about you. Elisa is just trying to fit in, to learn. It's not what you think." But even as he said it, I could tell there was hesitation in his voice. He wasn't looking me in the eye, and there was an uncomfortable tension between us. "I know, Alex, but don't you see? She's playing a game, and I'm scared you're not going to see it until it's too late." He didn't answer right away. His gaze dropped to the floor, and I knew he was thinking about her, about everything that had happened. For the first time in a long while, I felt a cold, distant gap between us. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Alex and Elisa only grew. What had started as innocent mentorship quickly spiraled into something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, but felt deep in my bones. Alex was different. His focus had shifted. Where he used to share everything with me, now I found myself waiting for him to come home at night, watching him close his phone or quickly change the subject when I asked about his day. Elisa's presence at the office had become almost constant, and each time she walked into the room, I could feel Alex's attention shift in her direction. I told myself I was being paranoid, but every little detail seemed to prove me right. Elisa was always there. A soft touch on Alex's arm, a laugh a little too loud, a gaze that lingered just a little too long. It wasn't subtle anymore. She was deliberate in her efforts, and Alex, despite all his promises, was starting to let his guard down. It happened on a Friday night, when I had stayed home to give Alex some space to unwind after a long week. I didn't think much of it when he mentioned that he needed to catch up on work at the office. But when I asked if Elisa was coming along, his response was quick, almost too quick. Yeah, she wants to go over some things. She's really been working hard, Erica. I nodded, trying to push the unease away. But as soon as he left, that nagging feeling settled in the pit of my stomach, refusing to go away. The office was quiet that evening, just the hum of the air conditioning and the soft clicking of keyboards in the background. Elisa had insisted on staying late to finish a project, something that had felt off from the start. And now, she was standing too close to Alex, her hand brushing against his, as they went over the documents spread out before them. She was dressed more provocatively tonight than usual, a tight blouse that hugged her curves, a skirt that barely brushed her thighs. And Alex? He seemed distracted, but there was a hesitation in his eyes that only fueled her determination. You've been so patient with me, Alex, Elisa said, her voice low and honeyed. I really appreciate everything you've taught me. Alex glanced up at her, and for the briefest moment, I saw the struggle in his eyes. He opened his mouth to say something, but Elisa was already moving closer, her fingers brushing against his arm, sending a jolt of warmth through him. I think you've learned enough for tonight, Alex said, his voice strained. We should probably, but Elisa didn't let him finish. She stepped even closer, her breath warm against his ear. You've been so kind, so generous with your time. I want to show you how grateful I am. Before he could react, Elisa kissed him, a soft, lingering kiss that sent a shockwave through Alex's chest. He froze for a second, his mind racing, but Elisa's lips were insistent, her hands roaming to his chest, tugging him closer. The world outside the office seemed to fade away. There was only the sensation of Elisa's touch, her scent, the warmth of her body pressed against his. And in that moment, Alex's resolve cracked. The fight inside him was brief, a fleeting whisper of guilt. But the temptation was too strong. He kissed her back. When Alex finally returned home that night, he looked different. There was a haunted look in his eyes, a quiet guilt that he couldn't hide. He didn't say anything as he walked through the door, but I could feel the distance between us before he even spoke. Erica, he began, his voice low and almost apologetic. But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to know. He had betrayed me, and somehow I already knew. It was in the way he wouldn't meet my gaze, in the way his hands trembled slightly as he set his keys on the counter. I wanted to scream, to cry, but the words wouldn't come. Erica, he repeated, stepping closer. I'm sorry, but all I could do was shake my head. The hurt was too much. The trust that I had given him was shattered, and I wasn't sure I could ever put it back together. I turned away from him, feeling the sting of tears that I refused to let fall. I need some space, Alex, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I need to think. That night, Alex slept on the couch, leaving me in the bed we had shared for so long. I lay there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. The betrayal burned deep, a jagged wound I wasn't sure how to heal. I didn't confront him again, not yet. I couldn't find the words to make him understand the depth of my pain. But deep inside, I knew something had shifted. Our world had fractured, and I didn't know if we could ever piece it back together again. It was a rainy afternoon when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it. Part of me already knew, deep down, that whatever waited on the other end of that call would break me. I pressed the phone to my ear, my hand trembling. Hello? There was a moment of silence, and then a voice I recognized all too well, syrupy sweet, masking a razor-sharp cruelty. Hi, Erica, Elisa chirped, too brightly. I thought you should hear it from me, not from anyone else. My stomach twisted into a knot. What are you talking about? You see, she continued, her voice softening into mock sympathy, I just felt bad keeping it from you. Alex kissed me at the office. It was really passionate. She gave a small, cruel laugh. He's amazing, isn't he? The world spun around me. My heart stopped, the blood draining from my face. You're lying, I whispered, my voice shaking. Am I? Elisa said innocently. You should ask him yourself. I thought you deserved to know. Before I could say anything else, she hung up, leaving me clutching the phone to my chest, gasping for air like someone had just ripped the ground from under my feet. I sat there for a long moment, paralyzed, until anger, pain, and betrayal surged through me in a storm. I grabbed my jacket, ignoring the rain pelting against the windows, and stormed out the door. When I reached Alex's place, I barely paused to knock. I threw open the door, soaked from the rain, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Alex was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. When he saw me, he immediately stood up, concern flashing in his eyes. "Erica? What's wrong?" I cut him off, my voice shaking. "Is it true?"
He froze.
"What?" I took a step closer, the words tearing from my throat. "Did you kiss Elisa?" His face paled, and in that moment, I had my answer. I saw it. The guilt, the shame, written all over him. "Erica," he said softly, I made a mistake." I stared at him, my chest heaving. "You kissed her?" He raked a hand through his hair, looking away. "She kissed me first." I didn't stop it right away. "Did you kiss her back?" I asked, my voice raw. His silence was answer enough. I staggered back, the room spinning. It felt like something inside me was cracking, splintering beyond repair. "How could you?" I choked out. After everything we've been through?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," Alex said desperately, stepping toward me. "It meant nothing. It was a mistake. I was weak, Erica. I was stupid. I swear but you still did it," I said, my voice breaking. "You still chose her over me, even for a second." Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall in front of him. I needed to stay strong, at least for this moment. "I love you, Erica," he said, his voice thick with regret. "Please, don't let this ruin us." I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. "You ruined us, Alex." I turned and walked out, ignoring his pleas behind me. The rain poured harder now, drenching me to the bone, but I didn't care. I needed to get away from the apartment, from the lies, from the life that was crumbling around me. I didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't stay. Not anymore. The rain hadn't stopped. It poured endlessly, a heavy, miserable backdrop to the chaos unraveling inside me. After hours wandering the streets, soaked and heartbroken, I found myself outside Alex's apartment again. Despite everything, some foolish part of me hoped he would be there, alone, regretting everything. Maybe we could talk, maybe it wasn't too late. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door with the spare key he had given me long ago. The apartment was silent. The lights were off except for a dim glow coming from the bedroom. My heart pounded wildly in my chest as I stepped inside, the sound of my own breathing deafening in the stillness. I walked toward the bedroom, calling out softly, "Alex?" The door was slightly ajar, and then I saw it. Alex, lying in bed, not alone. Elisa was there too, curled up against him under the sheets, their bodies tangled together, bare skin peeking out from under the blanket. Her head rested on his chest, a satisfied smile on her sleeping face. My world shattered into pieces at that moment. I staggered back, a broken sob escaping my lips. But they didn't stir. They were too lost in their betrayal, too comfortable in their destruction of everything I thought we had. Tears streamed down my face as I stumbled out of the apartment, the cold rain mixing with the bitterness on my cheeks. I didn't even know how I made it home. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. Bursting through the front door of my parents' house, I barely got out a word before I collapsed into my mother's arms, sobbing uncontrollably.
"Mom. Dad."
I cried out between ragged breaths. "You have to do something. Alex and Elisa, I couldn't even finish the sentence. My voice broke completely. They exchanged glances, calm, almost serene. My father gently took my shoulders, easing me to sit on the couch. "Sweetheart," my mother said carefully, "calm down." I stared at them, heartbroken, desperate for their anger, their support, anything. "Don't you understand?" I shouted. "They betrayed me. Elisa, she slept with Alex. I saw them, together." For a moment, there was silence, a heavy, crushing silence. Then my father sighed and exchanged another glance with my mother. "Erica," he said almost patronizingly, "maybe it's for the best." My mouth dropped open. "What?" My mother smiled, and said, We've always thought Elisa and Alex were more suited for each other. Elisa is softer, sweeter.
She knows how to support a man like Alex.
But I gasped, shaking my head violently. He was mine. I loved him. You still do, my father said kindly. But love isn't always enough, Erica. Sometimes the right match matters more. I stared at them, numb, as my mother added, we're happy for them. Elisa deserves someone like Alex. And honestly, after everything, maybe you need to rethink your priorities. The final blow. I stumbled to my feet, every part of me shaking. You're happy? Happy that my sister destroyed my relationship? Don't be dramatic, my father said, almost bored. Everything happens for a reason. I looked at them, at the people who were supposed to love me, protect me, and realized I was truly, utterly alone. Without another word, I turned and walked out into the rain once more, the door closing behind me with a heavy, echoing thud. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay here. Not with them. Not with the memories of everything I had lost. The girl who had believed in love, in family, in loyalty, she died that night, somewhere between Alex's betrayal and my parents' cold smiles. All that was left was me, broken, betrayed, and burning with a silent promise. One day, they would all regret losing me. I packed my bags quietly that night, my heart hollow and my soul battered.
No dramatic goodbye. No explanations.
No one deserved that from me, not Alex, not Elisa, and certainly not my parents. As the rain still poured outside, I typed one final message to Alex. I'm leaving this place. I can't stay where love and loyalty mean nothing. Our engagement is over.
Goodbye, Alex.
I turned off my phone after sending it, removed the SIM card, and tossed it into the trash at the airport. I wanted no way back. No last-minute guilt. No desperate pleas to stay. With nothing but my suitcase and the broken pieces of my heart, I boarded a plane to a distant country, somewhere no one would look for me, where I could start over and breathe again. The next morning, Alex arrived at my parents' house, his heart heavy and restless. The guilt from that night with Elisa still gnawed at him. He had tried to convince himself that it was a mistake, that maybe Elisa could fill the emptiness left by his betrayal, but the truth hit him like a fist to the gut. There was no one like Erica. He needed to fix things,
to explain,
to beg, if he had to. When he arrived, he found my parents sitting with Elisa, discussing something with a strange, casual happiness. You're here, Alex, my mother said, almost too cheerily. Perfect timing. We were thinking, with Erica gone, maybe it's time to make things official with Elisa.
She's always been close to you.
You two are so well suited. Alex's heart sank into his stomach. What do you mean, with Erica gone? My father smiled warmly. Come on, Alex. Don't dwell on it. Erica was too emotional. She left everything behind. You're better off with Elisa. Elisa smiled sweetly at him, her hand reaching for his. But Alex pulled back sharply, his mind spinning. He dug out his phone, opening the last message he had received from Erica. The words felt like a knife twisting in his chest. I'm leaving this place. I can't stay where love and loyalty mean nothing. Our engagement is over.
Goodbye, Alex.
His breath caught. She's gone, he whispered. She really left. He turned to my parents, his voice breaking. Where did she go? You must know. But my mother and father exchanged helpless glances. We have no idea, my father said stiffly. She didn't say anything. Honestly, we thought she would come to her senses. Alex quickly tried calling my number, once, twice, 3 times, but all he got was an automated voice. The number you are trying to reach is currently unavailable. Panic clawed at him. She was gone. And this time, it wasn't just a fight. It wasn't something he could fix with an apology or flowers. Erica had severed the cord completely, and he had no way to reach her. He sat down heavily, the weight of his choices crashing down on him. Elisa tried to move closer, but Alex recoiled. For the first time, he saw her clearly. The manipulations, the fake sweetness, the way she had chipped away at Erica's happiness while smiling to their faces. He couldn't even look at her. You ruined everything, he muttered under his breath, though he knew the real blame lay with himself. He had destroyed the best thing he ever had. And now, Erica was gone. Meanwhile, somewhere thousands of miles away, I looked out the airplane window at the endless clouds beneath me. I didn't know what the future held. All I knew was that I was free. For the first time in my life, I belonged to no one but myself. The flight was long and heavy with silence. I sat by the window, numb, watching the endless stretch of sky and clouds. I had cried all I could cry. Now, there was only emptiness, a tired, hollow ache that pulsed inside my chest. I thought about everything I had left behind. Alex, Elisa, my parents, people I had loved and trusted, who had turned me into a ghost in my own life. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. Tired of fighting for people who didn't choose me. Tired of begging for love that should have been freely given. Tired of hurting. When the plane finally landed, I stepped onto foreign soil with nothing but a suitcase and a heart stitched together by sheer willpower. The first thing I did was buy a new SIM card at the airport. A new number, a clean slate. No way for anyone from my old life to find me, not even by accident. As I walked out into the cool city air, everything felt different. The noise, the language, the people, all unfamiliar, all refreshingly detached from my past. I needed work, a way to stand on my own 2 feet. I spent the first few days searching, scanning ads, knocking on doors, feeling the edge of anxiety creep in. But fate, it seemed, wasn't entirely cruel. On the 3rd day, while waiting in line at a small cafe, I heard a voice behind me. "Erica?" I turned, confused, and there he was, Daniel Carter, my old college classmate. He had been one of the few people who had treated me kindly during my university days, a sharp, ambitious guy with a kind smile. "Daniel?" I gasped, stunned. He laughed, pulling me into a quick, warm hug. "What are you doing here?" The story tumbled out of me in pieces, carefully edited pieces. I couldn't bring myself to tell him everything yet, just that I had left home, was starting fresh, and needed a job. As I spoke, Daniel's brow furrowed thoughtfully. Then he smiled. "You're in luck," he said. "I'm running my own company now. Tech consulting and corporate management. We're actually looking for someone like you. Organized, hardworking, trustworthy." Tears burned behind my eyes, not from sadness, but from something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. "I would love to," I said, my voice breaking just slightly. He grinned. "You're hired." Just like that, a door opened. A chance at a life where I could build myself from the ground up, without anyone dragging me down. That night, as I lay in my tiny rented apartment, staring at the cracked ceiling, I felt something deep within me. A small flicker of strength I thought I had lost. I still miss them sometimes, Alex. The family I wished I had. The ache would probably never go away completely. But I knew now, I didn't need them to survive. I would heal. I would grow. And one day, they would look for me, and I would be so far beyond them, they wouldn't even recognize the woman I had become. Years had passed. The pain that once ruled my heart was now a distant memory, tucked away in a place I rarely visited. I had built a life here, a beautiful, solid life with Daniel by my side. We fell in love slowly but surely, through stolen glances, late-night conversations, mutual respect, and unwavering trust. He never rushed me, never made me feel less than. With Daniel, I was never invisible. I was cherished. A year ago, under the glittering lights of the city we now called home, he proposed. And 6 months later, we were married in an intimate ceremony filled with laughter, genuine love, and the family we chose, not the one I was born into. Now, Daniel was at the top of his game, the CEO of one of the largest corporate consultancy firms. His office was sleek and modern, a symbol of everything he had worked for. And sitting proudly on his desk, in a silver frame, was a photo of us, me in a soft white dress, him in a sharp black suit, both smiling as if the world had finally given us what we deserved. Meanwhile, Alex entered the building nervously, adjusting his tie. Years hadn't been too kind to him. After Elisa's many betrayals and their eventual ugly split, he had buried himself in work, trying to claw back the control he had lost in his personal life. Now he was here, seeking a crucial partnership for his struggling company. He had heard of Daniel Carter, the sharp, ruthless CEO whose decisions could make or break a business. Alex needed this deal desperately. He was led into Daniel's office by an assistant. As he stepped inside, Alex immediately noticed the decor. Powerful, commanding, And then, his eyes locked onto something that knocked the air from his lungs. A framed photograph on the desk. Erica. She looked different, stronger, radiant, a woman who had fought through storms and come out shining. In the picture, she leaned lovingly against Daniel, her smile real and untouchable. For a moment, Alex couldn't breathe. "Erica," he blurted out, before he could stop himself. His voice cracked slightly, his mind spinning. Daniel, who had been reviewing some papers, looked up sharply. His face turned cold, guarded. "You know my wife?" Daniel asked, his voice clipped. Alex stammered, guilt and regret crashing over him like a tidal wave. We knew each other. A long time ago." Daniel stood, his presence towering and commanding. His eyes burned into Alex with a fury that made him feel small, ashamed. "If you knew her," Daniel said slowly, dangerously, "then you must know exactly why she's not part of your life anymore." Alex swallowed hard. The weight of his mistakes, years old but still festering, pressed down on him. "She's happy," he managed to croak out. Daniel's lips curled into a slight, mocking smile. "More than you could ever imagine." He walked around the desk and stood inches away from Alex. "If you think you can waltz back into her life, even by accident, you're wrong. Erica belongs with people who value her, who protect her, who love her.
People like me."
Alex lowered his eyes, the shame unbearable. The meeting ended quickly after that. As Alex walked out of the building, the photo of Erica's bright, laughing eyes burned into his memory, a painful reminder of everything he had lost. And this time, he knew there was no getting her back. She had moved on. She had risen, without him. That evening, as the golden sunset bathed the city in warm light, I stood on the balcony of our penthouse apartment, a cup of tea in my hands. The soft breeze played with the ends of my hair, and I breathed it all in, the scent of new beginnings, the peace I had fought so hard to earn. Behind me, I heard the sliding doors open. Daniel's arms wrapped around my waist from behind, pulling me close against him.
"Tired, Mrs.
Carter," he whispered against my ear, his voice laced with affection. I smiled, leaning back into him. "Not when I'm with you." He turned me gently to face him. His eyes, warm, protective, and full of love, searched mine like he still couldn't believe I was real. "I had an interesting meeting today," he said casually. I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, an old acquaintance of yours came to the office." Something flickered in his expression, a brief shadow of anger, quickly chased away by calm certainty. "Alex," he said simply. I stiffened slightly, the name stirring something deep and forgotten in me. But the pain wasn't sharp anymore. It was like an old scar, a reminder, not a wound. "What happened?" I asked softly. Daniel brushed a stray hair from my face. "Nothing. He saw your photo. Asked about you." I made sure he understood. "You're not someone he gets to even think about anymore." I smiled faintly, touched more than words could say. Daniel wasn't just my husband. He was my home. He was my defender. He was the love that Alex could never be. "I love you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He cupped my face, his thumbs gently caressing my cheeks. "And I love you, Erica. Every broken, beautiful piece of you." He kissed me then, slow, deep, and sure, and I melted into him, letting the past dissolve completely. Meanwhile, Alex sat alone in his hotel room, a glass of whiskey untouched by his side. He stared blankly at the city lights outside, haunted by the image of Erica's smile in Daniel's photo frame. A smile that no longer had room for him, a happiness he could no longer touch. He realized, with a final, crushing certainty, he had been her whole world once. And now, he wasn't even a memory worth holding on to. Life had been kind to me and Daniel. Our days were filled with warmth, laughter, and dreams we built together. I had finally found peace, and I guarded it fiercely. But some ghosts refused to stay buried. One afternoon, as soft music played in our living room and I sat reading near the window, our doorbell rang. Daniel answered it, his voice tight when he called out, "Erica, it's them." I rose slowly, already knowing who it was. Standing at our doorstep, with fake smiles stretched thin across their desperate faces, were Elisa and my mother. Both looked far different from the polished, proud women I remembered. Their clothes, though expensive-looking, couldn't hide the weariness in their eyes. Their company had collapsed after my father's death. Their wealth was gone, and rumor had it that Alex had quietly crushed whatever remained of their empire, a final retaliation for the role they had played in losing me. Now, with no money and nowhere to turn, they had come to the daughter they had thrown away. "Erica, sweetheart," my mother cooed, stepping forward. "We've missed you so much. Family is everything, isn't it?" I said nothing, my heart a cold stone in my chest. Elisa chimed in, her voice sugary sweet. "You've done so well for yourself. We're so proud of you." I exchanged a glance with Daniel, who stood firmly at my side, his jaw tight with restrained anger. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. They dropped the act almost immediately. "We need some financial help," my mother said, her smile brittle. "Just until we get back on our feet." "Family helps family," Elisa added quickly, her eyes flickering not with affection, but calculation. I folded my arms. "Family?" I said, my voice low. "You mean the same family that chose Elisa over me? That mocked my pain? That celebrated my humiliation?" My mother bristled. "Erica, that's all in the past. Let's not hold grudges." Before I could answer, Elisa made a bold move, slinking closer to Daniel, pretending to stumble, letting her hand brush against his arm. She looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes, the same act she had used so many times before. "You're even more handsome in person, Daniel," she murmured. Daniel immediately stepped back, his face disgusted. "Touch me again," he said coldly, "and you'll find yourself thrown out onto the street." Elisa's face burned red with humiliation. I stepped between them, my fury barely contained. "Enough," I snapped. "I see you haven't changed, Elisa. You destroyed your own life with your greed and selfishness. Don't you dare try to infect mine." Turning to my mother, I added, "And you let it happen. You stood by and cheered while your daughter suffered. Don't you dare come to me now, asking for handouts." They sputtered, trying to defend themselves, but Daniel cut them off. "You both are no longer welcome here," he said sharply. "Not today. Not ever." He grabbed the door and opened it wide. "Leave." For a long, tense moment, they stood frozen, stunned that their usual tricks had failed, that I was no longer the desperate, pleading girl they remembered. Then, with angry, bitter glares, they turned and walked away, disappearing down the marble steps without a backward glance. Later that night, Daniel and I sat together on the couch, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said softly, kissing the top of my head. I closed my eyes, breathing him in, the safety, the love, the life we had fought for. "They're not my family anymore," I whispered. Daniel held me tighter. "We are." And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly, beautifully free. Weeks passed since that awful encounter with my mother and Elisa. Daniel and I barely spoke of them after that day. There was no need. They belonged to a part of my past that had no place in our future. We moved forward, hand in hand. One bright morning, I stood in the bathroom staring at the little stick in my hand, the pregnancy test. Positive. I pressed my hand against my mouth, tears filling my eyes. Joy, fear, wonder, they all crashed over me at once. When Daniel came home that evening, I was waiting for him by the doorway, nervously twisting my fingers. He frowned, concerned. "Everything okay, love?" I simply nodded and held out the tiny, white stick. For a moment he stared, not understanding. Then realization hit him like a tidal wave. "You're?" His voice broke. I nodded, laughing and crying at the same time. "We're going to have a baby." He swept me into his arms, spinning me around, laughing with a sound so pure and full of love that it filled every corner of my heart. "I love you," he whispered fiercely, pressing his forehead against mine. "You've made me the happiest man in the world." No grand mansion, no empty approval could have given me what I had in that moment, a man who chose me, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. Meanwhile, far away, Elisa and my mother were living in a cramped apartment in the city's decaying outskirts. Their fortunes had crumbled completely. The company debts they had hidden for so long had surfaced. Creditors hounded them. Their once admired family name was now a joke whispered in business circles. Elisa, desperate as ever, tried to cling to any man who could offer her security, but her charm had long since worn thin. My mother, who had spent her life looking down on others, now waited tables at a rundown cafe just to survive. Their fall was spectacular, and entirely their own doing. One night, in the tiny kitchen of their crumbling apartment, Elisa threw down a newspaper with a bitter hiss. On the cover was a photo, me and Daniel at a charity gala. Me, radiant in a silk gown. Daniel, handsome in his tuxedo, his hand proudly resting on my slightly rounded belly. The headline read, "Power couple Daniel and Erica Carter expecting first child." Elisa's face twisted in rage. She grabbed the newspaper and crumpled it, her nails digging into the paper. "That should have been me," she snarled. But deep down, both she and my mother knew the truth. It was never meant to be theirs. Because love, loyalty, and true strength can't be stolen. They had thrown away their chances the day they threw me away. Later that evening, as Daniel and I lay in bed, he placed his hand gently over my growing belly. "You're my everything," he murmured. I smiled, tears glistening in my eyes. "And you're mine," I whispered back. Outside, the city pulsed with life. But inside, in the home we built together, it was peaceful, unbreakable.
Ours.
Forever. The months passed in a blur of excitement and preparations. Daniel was at every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, his hand always wrapped around mine. He read every book he could find about fatherhood, determined to be the best man for our child. Our home became a little softer, a little more alive, a nursery painted in soft yellows and greens, tiny clothes folded neatly in drawers. For the first time in my life, I knew what real, unconditional love looked like. It was a rainy afternoon when our daughter came into the world, pink and crying, her tiny fists waving in the air. Daniel cut the cord himself, tears streaming down his face as he kissed my forehead again and again. "She's perfect," he whispered hoarsely, holding her carefully in his arms. I watched them, my heart nearly bursting from the beauty of it all. We named her Hope, because that's what she was. Proof that even the most broken hearts could heal. Proof that love could be reborn stronger, purer, and unstoppable. Meanwhile, across the city, Elisa sat alone on the cracked sofa of their tiny apartment. Their debts had only worsened. The walls seemed to close in tighter every day. Then came the final blow. A letter. Their last property, the old family estate, the only thing they had left, had been seized by the bank, auctioned off.
Gone.
Elisa crumpled the letter in her hands, tears of rage and helplessness spilling down her face. No amount of schemes, lies, or manipulation could save them now. They had lost everything. And unlike me, they had no one to rebuild with. No one who loved them enough to catch them when they fell. They were alone, exactly as they had made me feel all those years ago. In the quiet hospital room, Daniel and I sat together on the bed, Hope nestled safely between us. Daniel looked down at our daughter with pure adoration. "I promise," he said, voice thick with emotion, "she will always know she's loved. She'll never have to question it. Not for a second." I nodded, tears falling freely down my cheeks. I kissed my husband. I kissed my daughter. And in that moment, I knew. The past was finally buried. The future was here. And it was beautiful.